Hare Krishna. Welcome to Krishna Book Part 2, class number 7. We're entering the wrestling arena with Krishna and Balaram, chapter 44. They're going to continue their superhero pastimes.
Ooh.
But first, we're going to have some kirtan.
Great. Love that. Amy said in her reflection, she was talking about how Krishna's a superhero. She makes music video.
Okay, sweet souls, so good to be together with you. This is always a favorite night of ours. So shift around, invite any movement in your head, your neck, your jaw, your pelvis. Let's take a clearing breath. Inhale through your nose, fill up. Breathe in, we give our full attention and intention now. All the things we can do with our time and our energy and our evenings that we decided to come together to have Krishna Katha, to speak about Krishna, to be in this sonic yoga practice together. That's special. So we open our hearts and our minds now to receptivity with humility. We offer gratitude to the lineage of teachers for gifting us this knowledge, changing our lives. Take a deep breath in, fill up. Shri Shri Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Harinam Sankirtan ki, Pranam Bhakti Asang and Beyond ki, Shasha Class ki, Hari Hari Bol.
Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shilakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Panchakalpatarupyascha Kripasantubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Om. All right. So we read 3 chapters last week. Krishna entered Mathura. He connected to, reciprocated with a variety of people. There was a washerman who was not interested in serving Krishna. There was a florist who was. There was also a tailor who was interested. There was Kubja, and we'll see the florist, Sudama. He prayed for pure devotional service to Krishna, friendship with the devotees, and compassion for all living beings. And then there was Kubja, who had mixed desires. So she saw Krishna as the most attractive man. She did some service for him, but she also wanted to just enjoy being with the most attractive man. And Krishna said, I'll reciprocate with your desires later. And he did the same for Akrura. He said, you have to go home. I'm going to take care of some things here. He broke the bow, and Kamsa heard it and had the world's worst restless, sleepless night. And then Krishna played cat and mouse, Tom and Jerry, cat and mouse, with the elephant.
Oh, yeah.
And he beat the elephant. And then he sauntered with Balaram, with one of the tusks over their shoulder each. They just walked in like an action movie. And that's where we were picking up. And we had a number of wonderful reflections in the WhatsApp, just for those who are on the potentially billions of people on YouTube who are going to listen to this. We don't know. Hopefully. We want to share your realizations. Dream big.
Manifesting.
So let's repeat anything you heard, or you felt and experienced yourself that you shared or other people shared from the last week. We'll share it now out loud to get us into the flow. Yes.
Hi, everybody. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I'm getting feedback.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. I'll go with the feedback. But I'd love for everybody to share on WhatsApp. I especially like what Allison shared about how it sort of repeated what Carol's prayers were, that however you come, Krishna is willing to see you as you need him to be, which is really beautiful. So there was lots of shares that I loved, but I really start thinking about obsession. Obsession of how, because the wisdom of the sages was right at the part where Kamsa has made Vasudeva David to spare him and forgive him. And then even when Krishna walks in and plays with the atomic thing with the elephant, he's still so obsessed with the idea that it's going to be destroy Krishna and doesn't get it. His obsession is blinding him. So I'm going to stop. That's very polished.
Thank you. Yeah. Aaron's saying in the chat it's echoing. Is that when Nancy was speaking? Or like you guys can hear us okay over here? All right. So I'll repeat. So Nancy was giving, just giving some reflections about a few things, including like obsession. Kamsa is epitomizing obsession. He's been obsessed with Krishna, and not in a good way. Because his deep attachment is to live forever and to never be overcome by any material thing. And so the idea of death has just been haunting him for so long, because he had his death foretold, which is like really interesting because everyone's destined to die. Every embodied person has to leave the embodied state, either to enter another embodied state or to enter transcendence in whatever spiritual form they're qualified for and desire. But there's a kind of obsession built around that denial of death. So Kamsa has these nightmares, and it was contrasted with Krishna and Balaram peacefully drinking warm milk and going to bed, just like, and with their friends, that came from Vrindavan with them. And there's this contrast between spiritual consciousness, which we're all experiencing here too. We're in the Krishna and Balaram warm milk camp, and Kamsa, which is like just horror, absolute horror of running from inevitable death. And so he has these nightmares and everything. And she gave a number of other beautiful realizations that you can listen to the recording back for more. More reflections on Krishna.
Can I
Yes.
ask like a clarifying
Yeah.
question? So when I was reading in the Bhagavatam, in chapter, it's just something I never noticed before. I know Krishna comes by many different names, but every other verse was a different name for Krishna, and I just never noticed. I counted 5 in chapter 42, excluding
Wow.
Krishna, and and I think 5 in chapter 43. So I just never noticed that before. Like each verse almost alternated his name, so I just didn't know like how that happens. I was just
Amazing.
curious about that.
Can you,
Yeah, like in chapter 42, it was Lord Madhava, Lord Achyuta, Lord Mukunda, Lord Keshava, and Lord Urukrama. And then in chapter 43, the only thing, well, Hari was a little different. Baladeva and Janardana.
yeah, let's see.
Let me see if I could. I just was curious, like how, when is he called, why in some verses he's called Krishna and why in some verses.
So why is it that in some verses Krishna is called by one name, Krishna, or one of his other names?
We did read the story when he became Mukunda,
Yeah.
which I remembered, but then I don't know, all of a sudden I just kept reading and I had to go back and say, wait, is that Krishna?
Yeah. So if you look at like in the 10th canto, in chapter 42, text 7, Krishna is called Achyuta. And then the next verse is called Mukunda. And then he's called Keshava in the verse after that. Yeah. So did you read the purports? Is there anything in there about that?
I did
No, there-
not.
I don't see anything there.
that.
Well, it's interesting because Krishna has as many names. In fact, in the Bhagavatam is described that his incarnations are as numberless as the waves in the sea. His names are also numberless because they can refer to different incarnations, different pastimes. One of his names is Yashoda Nandana, the beloved son of Mother Yashoda. Another name is Devaki Nandana, the son of Devaki, who gave birth to him before he went to be with Yashoda. And so then there's names for his qualities. So there's infinite numbers of possibilities. As to why here, I couldn't say, but I can tell you in verse 8, Kubja, also known as Trivakra, which means bent in 3 places. She was very hunched. Simply by Lord Mukunda's touch, she was suddenly transformed into an exquisitely beautiful woman with straight, evenly proportioned limbs and large hips and breasts. Okay, so there's that. That's the moment where that he transformed her. One of the meanings of Mukunda is related to, I believe that one of the meanings of Mukunda, there's several meanings, is related to the one who frees you, the one who liberates you. So
Like
he's
people
freed her from that situation.
Krishna as a certain based on how they perceive him and what happens to them.
Yeah, that's a theme in this section, is that Krishna's reciprocating with people where they're at, and he's also exhibiting different kinds of pastimes. So he steps on her toes and lifts her up, and then by his touch she's transformed. And then the next verse, she starts to feel attraction to him. And in each of those verses, he's called by a different name. So I'm not an expert in the Sanskrit, and there's no purports to these verses in the Bhagavatam. So if there's any commentary about the acharyas, the previous acharyas like the six Goswamis, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, they're not given here. Not that there isn't a commentary. I could look in some of those books. We have some of the commentaries. But I think it's interesting that you noticed that. Yeah. Yeah. Let me make a note of that. And then if I can find anything in our commentaries, maybe they can cast some light, because it's in the Sanskrit.
Or maybe it's like what you said, because he fixed her, then he freed her.
Yeah,
then
it could be that.
So,
Sometimes it could also be poetic, like to fit the meter,
Okay.
because the meter is a certain way. Maybe they wanted to do that.
I did learn that she represents, her crookedness bent down by the great burdens of countless wicked rulers.
Oh, she was bent down by the burden of countless wicked rulers, because she was serving Kamsa. She didn't like him, but she felt she had to serve him. She was hunched over. Interesting. Yeah, if you remember the beginning of Krishna book, Brahma was approached by the earth, who felt oppressed by the collective weight, the burden of very evil-minded persons who were in power and were amassing military force and breaking the rules of Dharma and really creating a problem for other people. So she approached Brahma. Brahma prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said, "I'm coming," before he appeared as Krishna. So that was, the world was going through that. So if you ever feel like it's tough times, and maybe sometimes some of the people in power don't completely have their head straight, you're in good company, because devotees have been feeling like that age after age. And Krishna comes sometimes in person, sometimes he comes as a sound incarnation, like as a Mahamantra. That's a valid incarnation of Krishna in this age to deal with some things.
Yeah, I love the reflection you gave the group, the class this week around, if Krishna came to you, what would you ask for?
Yeah.
And I was really sitting with what Sudama's prayers were, and I wrote them down and like putting them somewhere to like remember these. This is that to me, this unshakable love. He asked for unshakable love for Krishna, so for bhakti, friendship with devotees, and compassion for all living beings. And that really touched me, really inspired me, and something I've been praying for since, those three things. And I also really appreciated Pam's share, like right before class, around how she said she would ask for equal vision, the ability to see all beings, and that reminded me of that aspect of Sudama's prayer, which was compassion for all living beings. Like if we could see all with equal vision and see the soul, and we could have compassion.
Yeah, we would.
And we could have more friendships with people, right? And perhaps our hearts would soften enough that we could experience unshakable love.
Yeah.
For Krishna.
That reminds me about a section in the 11th canto that I mentioned before, where three general gradations of devotees are given, and in the entry-level devotional service is described that one has appreciation for God, but they cannot understand his presence in the living beings, right? They're kind of single-pointed, tunnel vision, and we can see that in fanatics or sentimental devotees without philosophical grounding or mature devotional service in any tradition. There's a way in which it's like, it's me and it's God, and like God's only here, very linear, and they don't really know how to bring that out into the way they interact with other people. And then it's described that the highest level sees God in everyone and everything all the time. But to get to that highest, you go through the second stage, which is you develop love for God, but you also develop friendship for those who are trying to practice spiritual life. There's a sense of kinship of like, here we are in this world, and here's another person who's trying to practice bhakti, just devotion to God, wherever, in whatever tradition, whatever way. There's like legitimate sense of like, oh wow, thanks for doing that. I really appreciate you. And there's a certain kind of fraternity in that. And there's also it's described there that there's two other things. There's a sense of mercy or kindness to the innocent, those who aren't really practicing anything. Therefore, they don't fall into that category. They're not exactly like opposed, but they're just kind of innocent, like a child. And for them, someone in this position is like thinking, how can I do good for them? You know, and maybe they can directly, maybe they can't, but they'll pray for them. They want good for them. They're like, why shouldn't they have all the blessings that I've had? Why me? I'm not so special. They should have it too. And they're always trying to like extend, you know, expand. And for those who are inimical and actually like opposed, they just give them the gift of space. So this mature capacity to deal with different persons in different ways is a hallmark of what's called the Madhyam Adhikari, the second level devotee. And it's really important that we come to that level, because it's practicing at that level where a few really good things happen. One is you don't cause offenses to other living beings because you know how to deal with them properly. And you start to actually see Krishna manifest in them, which means that your Krishna consciousness is not like just whenever you're reading the Bhagavad Gita or chanting on your beads or seeing a deity. It's actually more alive throughout the day, which is great, because this is not like just a belief system or a thing that you can do here or there. God consciousness, Krishna consciousness is a capacity people have to be experienced at every moment. And it's through this second level of devotional service that one comes to the highest level. So like getting to the point where you start to deal with devotees with appreciation and friendship is really valuable. Getting to the point where you start to like even practice having compassion for innocent beings, and practice like keeping a respectful distance from those who are just not ready to hear about spiritual life. These are really important moves in one's spiritual advancement. And Sudama asked for like really just three of those important things, like love for Krishna, friendship with the devotees, compassion for the living entities. In fact, you can say compassion for the living entities who are not devotees would include like being kind to those who are ready to receive that, and also giving the gift of space to those who can only handle that. Like if you can imagine, if someone's very, they've already made up their mind that about spiritual life, that, oh, it's all junk, it's terrible. And you can see that, you wouldn't give them any more ammunition. You should be like, okay, I respect your free will. You have free will. You can feel whatever you want to feel. I'm not going to make you think anything you don't want to think. And already you're giving them something that potentially other true believers have never given them, which is the gift of you be you. I don't need you to change for me. I accept you as you are. You're not gonna burn and suffer for eternity. I love you. You're part and parcel of Krishna. You want to hang out sometime? Or not? You know, probably not. But there's that respect, and then let him be. So Sudama's prayers are they're from that 11th canto. They're very like informative for us. It's very practical for us. It's a great prayer to remember. These are three really important things. Yeah. Any more reflections before we jump into chapter 44?
I had a short one, and it made me think of that phenomenon when we were back in school, and often your first instinct to answer a multiple choice question, for example, was usually right. And if you spent a lot of time kind of ruminating on the response, you often would pick another answer that was maybe not correct. And so when I was pondering this question around what would I ask Krishna if I had an opportunity, I wrestled a little bit, because my first innate response was to ask for something that would help me personally, like on my journey, versus thinking more broadly and widely about the world. And I kept trying to sort of like um negotiate with myself that, oh no, you should not be asking for something for you. You should be asking for something that has a greater benefit. And I just didn't know if you had any thoughts or comments on that, because my first gut reaction was to ask for like the right level of trust and understanding in Krishna, not blind faith, but just more of a solid foundation, which has been elusive for me.
Well, I think it's important to understand, like you said, it's important to pay attention to what your gut tells you when you ask yourself questions, because you get a glimpse of a certain level of truth. And I don't think it's either or. I think it's like, and it's also important to understand where you want to be aiming. So like the part of yourself that's saying, oh, well, you shouldn't feel that. I would reframe it like, it's not that you shouldn't feel something exactly, because if you tell yourself you shouldn't feel something, that doesn't actually make the feeling go away, right? It's kind of like a yes and. Yes, I hear you. And it would be really nice to, like that. I think that part, the essence of that part that's kind of like trying to judge or adjust, the best part of that is that it's actually saying that's not really gonna, there's not everything is contained in that desire. There are deeper desires. There's like a destination, there's a goal, and here it is over there. Look in the distance, pure devotional service, where it's like not just for you, for everyone. And there's truth in that realization too. So both things can be true, right? I think because if we don't actually be honest with ourselves about where we're at, it's difficult to actually practice with integrity, because we're actually dividing ourselves. And if we don't actually acknowledge that where I'm at is not necessarily the all in all, and there's a way in which my heart can deepen, then we put a ceiling on our practice, at least temporarily, where we slow down and maybe even press pause in growing. Because the reality is that we don't really know how to desire what's best just right away by default, without coming in contact with those who are experiencing something deeper, and even the potential for, like there's a story, it's kind of like a parable, about an old lady whose daily task was to collect dried wood and to carry it and bring it down for the village. And she was getting old, so her body was not as strong as it used to be. She was like with great difficulty going out every day and collecting these sticks and like putting them on her back, tied up, and like carrying them down, hobbling down to the village, right? And like she's getting older and it's harder, and her knees hurt and her back hurts. And one day she's going out there, she's like just so tired, and she's coming back, and like sticks she trips on something, the sticks all fall down. And she calls out, "Oh my God, oh my God." And he appears. And he says, "What would you like?" She says, "Just put these sticks back on my back." Like we'll have a frame of reference. It's like, this is my little box. If I can get the sticks on my back, then I'm good. And if I can't, then things are bad. And it's like, well, you could have asked for other things. But the reality is we're kind of always bounded by what we can see and what our level of consciousness is. And it's not to shame anybody. It's like, it's good to know that about ourselves. That's why we have to hear about things beyond and outside of our box. Otherwise, it's just one form or another of, can you please put these sticks on my back? God, like really, is that too much to ask? When he's trying to take the whole thing away and give you something so much better. But we don't even know what that is. We have to hear about it. So we use this analogy today. When you're climbing a mountain, you have to go forward towards the mountain. But when you're doing that, there's ups and downs, because there's foothills and there's valleys and plateaus and stuff. But as long as you're aiming at that goal, then wherever you're at, you deal with the next step appropriately. So if the next step right now is like, I really just got to get through this crisis situation going on right now, be real with that. Deal with it effectively, but dispassionately. But also remember that you're going over there. You're not living in this moment forever. You're going right over there. You can see it. You're aiming at it. Even if it's just one step at a time, that's where you're going. So you have to have both, right? And by the way, that desire you had so-called just for yourself, that's a very advanced desire. To have like mature faith in Krishna, that's not just blind faith or blind disbelief. It's like you want to have that synthesis of the head and the heart, right? That's because people can ask for like, give me a pair of shoes, So just want to celebrate that that's not a bad desire at all. And if that desire is fulfilled, like just all of a sudden, if it's fulfilled, you would find that your higher spiritual desires would start to come into focus and make sense more anyway. So it's a good practical goal to have. Someone had their hand up. Yeah. These sticks on my back. Did someone have their hand up at some point? No, okay. All right, so I think we're ready to go to chapter 44, right?
Yeah.
Great. Krishna, 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 hey. Krishna, 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 hey. Krishna, 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 Rakshama. Krishna, 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 Pahima. Rama Rakshava, Rama Rakshava, Rama Rakshava, Rakshama. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Pahimam. Krishna Baki Jai. Hey, that song has that phenomenon too. Rama Rakshava, Krishna Keshava, different names. Don't know. Yeah, when you apply tilak, there's like 11 different places you put tilak in your body, and each one has a different name. Om Keshavaya Namaha, Om Narayan, Madhava, Govinda, Vishnave, Madhusudan, Trivikram, Vamana, Sridhar, Hrishikesh, Padmanabha, and then lower back Damodara. Yeah. Why this one for that and this one for the other, I couldn't tell you. But they all have deep meanings with multiple meanings, actually. Okay, so we're on chapter 44. And the title of the chapter is a spoiler alert. The title of the chapter is The Killing of Kamsa. So in case anybody out there was cheering for him and thought he'd somehow turn it around, well, he's going to die. But it's going to be good for him because when someone dies because of Krishna, that's really good. After Kamsa's wrestlers expressed their determination, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the killer of Madhu, one of the meanings of Madhu is that there was a historic demon, two demons, Madhu and Kaitaba, who stole the Vedas from Brahma's mind. And so one of Krishna's names is Madhu Sudana, the killer of the Madhu demon.
That's different than Midori, like calling someone Madhu from Midori.
Yeah, it's different. The Supreme Personality of God, the killer of Madhu, confronted Chanura, and Lord Balaram, the son of Rohini, confronted Mushtaka. Krishna and Chanura, and then Balaram and Mushtaka locked themselves hand to hand, leg to leg, and each began to press against the other with a view to coming out victorious. They joined palm to palm, calf to calf, head to head, chest to chest, and began to strike each other. Sound. The fighting increased as they pushed each other from one place to another. One captured the other and threw him down on the ground, and another rushed from the back to the front of another and tried to overcome him with a hold. The fighting increased step by step. There was picking up, dragging and pushing, and then legs and hands were locked together. All the arts of wrestling were perfectly exhibited by the parties as each tried his best to defeat his opponent. But the audience in the wrestling arena was not very much satisfied because the combatants did not appear to be equally matched. They considered Krishna and Balaram to be mere boys before Chanura and Mushtaka, who were the strongest wrestlers, as solid as stone. Being compassionate and favoring Krishna and Balaram, the many ladies in the audience began to talk as follows. Dear friends, there is injustice here. Another said, even in front of the king, this wrestling is going on between incompatible sides. The ladies had lost their sense of enjoyment. They could not encourage the fighting between the strong and the weak. Mushtaka and Chanura are just like thunderbolts, as strong as great mountains. And Krishna and Balaram are two delicate boys of very tender age. The principle of justice has already left this assembly. Persons who are aware of the civilized principles of justice will not remain to watch this unfair match. Those taking part in watching this wrestling match are not very much enlightened. Therefore, whether they speak or remain silent, they are being subjected to the reactions of sinful activities. There is I don't know if it's because it's not here in the Krishna book, but I believe in the section of the Bhagavatam, it's described that by the ladies here, they say that if you witness something unjust happen and you don't leave or speak up, you become implicated in it. There's a kind of like way in which, like, if you see something, you know it's wrong with your God-given intelligence, and if you can't fix it, you don't say anything, you just kind of accept it, and you're like okay with it, and you also participate in, because they're just sitting there watching this, they're enjoying the proceedings, and you kind of profit from it, then you're like implicated. It's like, yeah, I'm all right with this whole thing. Then basically you get part of the karma of it. It's like, if you're all right with it, then you get part of the results. So good to notice when something's not right. Maybe you can't fix it. Maybe you can't even leave, but you can say something, you can think something, and not just like, oh well, everyone else is diving into it, may as well go into it as well. What's the harm? The harm is you get degraded a little bit. Just like if you see a mess and you're like, I could clean it up, but I'll wash these dishes later. It's like you take on a little bit of that mode of ignorance yourself. Whereas if you just clean it, you also clean your heart a little bit. Interesting principle. But my dear friends, another lady in the assembly spoke out, just look at the face of Krishna. There are drops of perspiration on his face from chasing his enemy, and his face appears like a lotus flower with drops of water. Another lady said, don't you see how the face of Lord Balaram has turned especially beautiful? There is a reddish hue on his white face because he is engaged in a strenuous wrestling match with Mushtika. Another lady in the assembly addressed her friend. Dear friend, just imagine how fortunate is the land of Vrindavan, where the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself is present, always decorated with flower garlands, and engaged in tending cows along with his brother, Lord Balaram. He is always accompanied by his cowherd boyfriends, and he plays his transcendental flute. The residents of Vrindavan are fortunate to be able to constantly see the lotus feet of Krishna and Balaram, which are worshipped by great demigods like Lord Shiva and by the goddess of fortune. We cannot estimate how many pious activities were executed by the damsels of Vrajabhumi, so that they were able to enjoy the Supreme Personality of Godhead by looking upon the unparalleled beauty of his transcendental body. The beauty of the Lord is beyond compare. No one is higher than or equal to him in beauty of complexion or bodily luster. Krishna and Balaram are the reservoir of all kinds of opulence, namely wealth, strength, beauty, fame, knowledge, and renunciation. Those are the 6 primary opulences. In a verse given, I don't remember what Shastra it's in, but it's given by Parashara Muni. Parashara Muni, if I'm not mistaken, isn't Parashara Muni the father of Vyasadeva? Parashara is, yeah, he's the grandfather of Vyasadeva. Grandfather of Vyasadeva, yeah. He says that these are the 6 opulences, the primary opulences of the Lord. Wealth, strength, beauty, fame, knowledge, and renunciation. They're all things that people are chasing after in the material world. Some percentage of the material aspect of these, they all have, they're all considered opulences. They're desirable, and Krishna is the source of all these in perfection. So these women are praying. They're continuing to say, the gopis are so fortunate that they can see and think of Krishna 24 hours a day, beginning from their milking the cows or husking the paddy or churning the butter in the morning. While engaged in cleaning their houses and washing their floors, they are always absorbed in thought of Krishna. Now Prabhupada is speaking, so they finished speaking. The gopis give a perfect example of how one can execute Krishna consciousness even while performing various types of material engagements. By constantly being absorbed in the thought of Krishna, one cannot be affected by the contamination of material activities. The gopis, therefore, are perfectly in trance. Samadhi, the highest perfectional stage of mystic power. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is confirmed that one who is constantly thinking of Krishna is a first-class yogi among all kinds of yogis. That's chapter 6, verse 47. My dear friends, one lady told another, we must accept the activities of the gopis to be the highest form of piety. Otherwise, How could they have achieved the opportunity of seeing Krishna both morning and evening? In the morning when he goes to the pasturing ground with his cows and cowherd boyfriends, and in the evening when he returns with them, playing on his flute and smiling very brilliantly. When Lord Krishna, the supersoul of every living being, understood that the ladies in the assembly were anxious for him, he decided not to continue wrestling, but to kill the wrestlers immediately. The parents of Krishna and Balaram, namely Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda, Vasudeva, and Devaki, were also very anxious because they did not know the unlimited strength of their children. Remember, Krishna was born to Vasudeva and Devaki, and he was transported by Vasudeva to protect him from Kamsa to Vrindavan to his friend, Nanda Maharaj, and Yashoda, who raised him. So he has two sets of parents. They're all here, actually. They're all here in the assembly. Parental anxiety. Ever like watch your kids go to play a hockey game or something? And it's oh my God, why do they have to be a goalie? They're getting puck slapped in their face or whatever, you know? It's like that, but ramped up big time. Krishna's wrestling these pillars of mountainous pillars of strength. They didn't know how powerful Krishna is. Lord Balaram was fighting with the wrestler Mushtaka in the same way that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was fighting and wrestling with Chanura. Lord Krishna appeared to be cruel to Chanura, and he immediately struck him thrice with his fist. Boom, boom, boom.
Let Krishna read this sentence because thrice is her favorite.
Thrice.
I say thrice in yoga classes to do thrice more. Thrice more.
Lord Krishna appeared to be cruel to Chanura, and he immediately struck him thrice with his fist. Little combination. 1, 2, 3. The great wrestler was jolted to the astonishment of the audience. What astonishment sound like? Yeah. Imagine a whole thousands of people, and they're all like, Krishna, because Krishna is just maybe even, at best a standstill against these. And then all of a sudden he thrice this combo, 1, 2, 3 hits.
How old is he?
Krishna's like 14 years old or something. The thing about Krishna is that he looks older than he is. So he looks about 18. Like he looks like he's a fresh young man at the height of his strength. He's fully grown, but he is technically only like 14 when he leaves Vrindavan, 13 or 14.
And does Balaram look the same age?
Balaram's like him. Balaram's like a little bit older. No, I think because Balaram was born the same year, but like a month and a half before Krishna.
So he looks also older.
I believe. Yeah, they look like they're about 18, but they're only like 13 or 14. And yeah, Krishna looks like that for the rest of his time on the planet. He never actually gets gray hairs, by the way. Right. Chanura then took his last chance and attacked Krishna just as one hawk swoops upon another. Folding his two hands, he began to strike the chest of Krishna. Two-hand chop. But Lord Krishna was not even slightly disturbed, any more than an elephant is when hit by a flower garland. Krishna quickly caught the two hands of Chanura and began to wheel him around. And simply by this centrifugal action, Chanura lost his life. Krishna then threw him to the ground. Chanura fell just like the flag of Indra, and all his nicely fashioned ornaments were scattered hither and thither. Mushtaka also struck Balaram, and Balaram returned the stroke with great force. Mushtaka began to tremble and vomit blood. Distressed, he gave up his vital force and fell down, just as a tree falls down in a hurricane. After the two wrestlers were killed, a wrestler named Kuta came forward. Lord Balaram immediately caught him in his left hand, right? Not even his right hand. Catches him in his left hand and killed him nonchalantly. A wrestler of the name Shala came forward, and Krishna immediately cracked his head with a kick. A wrestler named Toshala came forward and was killed in the same way. Thus all the great wrestlers were killed by Krishna and Balaram, and the remaining wrestlers fled from the assembly out of fear for their lives. All the cowherd boyfriends of Krishna and Balaram approached them and congratulated them with great pleasure. While trumpets resounded and drums were beaten, the leg bells on the feet of Krishna and Balaram tinkled. So I'm trying to remember which of the acharyas it is. I believe, and it's either Vishwanath or Jiva Goswami describes that there is a little scene here that happens at this time. Okay, so Kamsa's been trying to kill Krishna. He set him up against this killer elephant. No problem for Krishna. He set him up against the two most powerful wrestlers, and apparently they're cadre of, like, you know, fan wrestlers, sub wrestlers, hench wrestlers. Krishna kills them all too, right? And this is an open competition, because it's supposed to be like an open competition. You know, whoever wins, may the best person win. But it's loaded. It's rigged. All right. So Krishna wins it. And then the boys actually rush the stage. They rush onto they're like cheering on, you know, it's like, I mean, what's like Rocky or something. There's like, you know, you rush the hero, and probably like they're carrying him on his shoulders. And then Krishna and Balaram begin to wrestle their friends in a friendly way, like they always did growing up. And Krishna and Balaram lose. They lose. And Krishna gets up and looks at Kamsa. And it's supposed to be taunting, because it's like, look at you. You sent these guys to kill me. I'm so weak that these boys can beat me up, and even I can take care of these so-called powerful wrestlers. It's just taunting. He's actually like, well, he's Krishna. He's Krishna. I mean, he's God. But even growing up, his friends would regularly beat him. And, you know, sometimes he would win. And that's the thing about Vrindavan. It's like, his friends are like, you're not such a big deal. I beat you in wrestling yesterday, and I could do it again today. You know, they're friends. Sometimes he wins, sometimes he loses. Yeah. So there's that amusing scene, taunting Kamsa. All the people gathered there began to clap in great ecstasy, and no one could estimate Haribol, clap in ecstasy. So clapping is a bona fide Vedic activity. It's there. And no one could estimate the bounds of their pleasure. The Brahmanas present began to praise Krishna and Balaram ecstatically. Only Kamsa was morose. He neither clapped nor offered benediction to Krishna. Kamsa resented that the trumpets and drums should be played for Krishna's victory, and he was very sorry that the wrestlers had been killed and had fled the assembly. He therefore immediately ordered the band to stop playing and addressed his men as follows. I order that these two sons of Vasudeva be immediately driven out of Mathura. The cowherd boys who have come with them should be plundered and all their riches taken away. Nanda Maharaj should immediately be arrested and killed for his cunning behavior, and that rascal Vasudeva should also be killed without delay. Also my father Ugrasena, who has always supported my enemies against my will, should be killed. So he's having a full meltdown, absolute meltdown. He's not even trying to pretend he's a good guy anymore. He's just like, kill him all, you know? When Kamsa spoke in this way, Lord Krishna became very angry with him. And within a second, he jumped onto the high, is it pronounced dais?
I don't know what that is. I'll look it up.
It's like a raised platform. Dais. Dais. They're both valid. It's a raised platform.
Dayuhs. How do you pronounce it?
Dais.
Dayus.
Within a second, he jumped onto the high dais of King Kamsa. Kamsa was prepared for Krishna's attack, for he knew from the beginning that Krishna was to be the supreme cause of his death. Kamsa immediately unsheathed his sword and prepared to answer the challenge of Krishna with sword and shield. As Kamsa wielded his sword up and down, hither and thither, Lord Krishna, the supreme powerful Lord, caught hold of him with great force. So now we have a battle between a man who's unarmed and a man who's armed with sword and shield. If there were two normal men, it would not be in doubt who would win. But one of them happens to be Krishna. Lord Krishna, the Supreme Lord, caught hold of him with great force. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the shelter of the complete creation, and from whose lotus navel the whole creation is manifested, immediately knocked the crown from the head of Kamsa and grabbed his long hair in his hand. He then dragged Kamsa from his seat to the wrestling dais and threw him down. Then Krishna at once straddled his chest and began to strike him over and over again. Simply from the strokes of Krishna's fist, Kamsa lost his vital force. To assure his parents that Kamsa was dead, Because remember, they're watching in horror as the son is attacked by a man with a sword
Who
who ordered their death.
Ordered their death, who killed all those babies, who has been trying to kill Krishna the entire book.
Yeah, his whole life. To assure his parents that Kamsa was dead, Lord Krishna dragged him, just as a lion drags an elephant after killing it. When people saw this, there was a great roaring sound from all sides, as some spectators expressed their jubilation, and others cried in lamentation. From the day Kamsa had heard he would be killed by the 8th son of Devaki, he was always thinking of Krishna with his wheel in hand. And because he was very much afraid of his death, he was thinking of Krishna in that form 24 hours a day without stopping, even while eating, while walking, and while breathing. And naturally, he got the blessing of liberation. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated, Siddhartha Bhava Bhavidaha, chapter 8, verse 6. A person gets his next life according to the thoughts in which he is always absorbed. Kamsa was thinking of Krishna with his wheel, which means Narayana, who holds a wheel, conch shell, lotus flower, and club. So a little detail here on the topic of like Krishna's names. When we read about how he dragged Kamsa by the hair, threw him down, and beat him to death with his own fist, he's described here, Prabhupada describes him, as the Bhagavatam describes him, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the shelter of the complete creation, and from whose lotus navel the whole creation is manifested. Could be like Padmanabha, that's one of the names. That means he from whose navel, lotus navel, the universe is formed. And the shelter of the complete creation could be Narayana. That's one of the meanings of Narayana. So it's interesting because if you look at like that moment, Kamsa was always, like any materialist, he's thinking that he's independent and he's fearing dying. But here's Krishna trying to give him liberation. And Krishna kills him. He's just about to take him by the hair, throw him down and end his life and liberate him. And what is he described as? He's described as the shelter of all of creation. He from whose navel the universe is actually manifest. So what looks like one guy killing another guy is actually the supreme source receiving his home part and parcel back into him. So in his names, there's a certain sense of what's actually happening here, right? Aside from the Leela of like, oh, there's this boy and he's clearly outmatched. Oh my God, he just killed the king. Aside from that, there's the Lord actually reclaiming his own part and parcel. And it's there in his names. So sometimes things like that, there's a little bit of clarity as to why. And the more you read these pastimes and read especially the purports, commentaries, when the acharyas talk about these things, they'll point these kinds of details out. You'll learn to identify.
It's a story, there was about somebody who was kind of evil, but I think his son was maybe named Narayan. And then when he died, he called out to him and he was liberated because even though he was calling son, he called out the name of the Lord. That's
Ajamila, Canto 6, Chapter 1. 1 and 2, there's a whole pastime there. Ajamila was a Brahmana. He was maybe not necessarily a devotee, but he was a pious and advanced person in the mode of goodness. And he became overcome one time because he saw a couple actually engaged in copulating. He saw something he shouldn't have, and he saw that, and he became like unable to get it from his mind. He became just obsessed with gratifying the senses, and he decided to leave his wife, decided to leave his practice, decided to leave all cultured activity, and became basically a thug. He committed all kinds of crimes. He took up with a prostitute and had a bunch of kids with her and committed crimes just to maintain himself. And but he named his son, his youngest son, Narayan, because that was a holdover, a carryover from his pious life. Not that he cared anymore directly for the Lord, but he named him Narayana. And when he was about to die, he saw the servants of Yamaraj come to take him, to drag him to his next destination. He called out for his son, Narayana, Narayana, my boy. And because he called out the Lord's name, and had been calling it out, it was forbidden for him to be taken into a hellish situation. He was given special exemption. And he witnessed this exchange between those who are trying to drag him down and those who said, no, he stays where he is. And he realized what he'd given up in his spiritual practice, went back to it, left his life of crime, just spent the rest of his life in austerities at Haridwar, and then practiced devotional service until he died. And I believe it's described he went back to God at that point. But it's talking, that section is talking about the glories and power of Krishna's names. Why did we start talking about that? Because Narayana.
Yeah. Kamsa was meditating on that form
Yeah.
when Krishna died.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he saw. He's like face to face with him, just getting beaten by those divine lotus hands. According to the opinion of authorities, Kamsa attained Sarupya Mukti after death. That is to say, he attained the same form as Narayana, Vishnu. On the Vaikuntha planets, all the inhabitants had the same bodily features as Narayana. After his death, Kamsa attained liberation and was promoted to Vaikuntha Loka. From this instance, we can understand that even a person who thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as an enemy gets liberation or a place in a Vaikuntha planet. So, what to speak of the pure devotees who are always absorbed in favorable thoughts of Krishna? Even an enemy killed by Krishna gets liberation and is placed in the impersonal Brahma Jyotir. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is all good, anyone thinking of him either as an enemy or as a friend gets liberation. But the liberation of the devotee and the liberation of the enemy are not the same. The enemy generally gets the liberation of Sayujya, that's merging. And sometimes he gets Sarupya liberation. Kamsa had 8 brothers, headed by Kanka. And all of them younger than he. And when they learned that their elder brother had been killed, they combined together and rushed toward Krishna in great anger to kill him. Kamsa and his brothers were all Krishna's maternal uncles, brothers of Krishna's mother, Devaki. When Krishna killed Kamsa, he killed his maternal uncle, which is against the regulations of Vedic injunctions. Although Krishna is independent of all Vedic injunctions, he violates the Vedic injunctions only in inevitable cases. Kamsa could not be killed by anyone but Krishna, therefore Krishna was obliged to kill him. But as far as Kamsa's 8 brothers were concerned, Balaram took charge of killing them. Balaram's mother, Rohini, although the wife of Vasudeva, was not the sister of Kamsa, therefore Balaram took charge of killing all of Kamsa's 8 brothers. He immediately took up an available weapon, most probably the elephant's tusk which he carried, and killed the 8 brothers one after another, just as a lion kills a flock of deer. Krishna and Balaram thus verify the statement that the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears in order to give protection to the pious and to kill the impious demons who are always enemies of the demigods. The demigods from the higher planetary systems showered flowers, congratulating Krishna and Balaram. Among the demigods were powerful personalities like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, and all joined together in showing their jubilation over Kamsa's death. There were beating of drums and showering of flowers from the heavenly planets, and the wives of the demigods danced in ecstasy. The wives of Kamsa and his 8 brothers were aggrieved at the sudden death of their husbands, and all of them struck their foreheads and shed torrents of tears, crying loudly and embracing the bodies of their husbands, which lay on the wrestling dais. The wives of Kamsa and his brothers lamented, addressing the dead bodies. Our dear husbands, you are so kind and are the protectors of your dependents. Now, after your death, we are also dead, along with your homes and children. We no longer look auspicious. On account of your death, the auspicious functions to take place, such as the sacrifice of the bow, have all been spoiled. Our dear husbands, you treated persons ill who were faultless, and as a result, you have been killed. This is inevitable because a person who torments an innocent person must be punished by the laws of nature. We know that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the Supreme Master and Supreme Enjoyer of everything. Therefore, one who neglects his authority can never be happy, and ultimately, as you have, he meets death. Since Krishna was kind and affectionate to his aunts, he solaced them as far as possible. The ritualistic ceremonies performed after death were then conducted under the personal supervision of Krishna, because he happened to be the nephew of all the dead princes. After finishing this business, Krishna and Balaram immediately released their father and mother, Vasudeva and Devaki, who had been imprisoned by Kamsa. Remember, Vasudeva and Devaki were imprisoned for most of the Krishna books so far. Most of Krishna's life. Krishna and Balaram fell at their parents' feet and offered them prayers. Vasudeva and Devaki had suffered so much trouble from Kamsa because Krishna was their son. Devaki and Vasudeva were fully conscious of Krishna's exalted position as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, although Krishna touched their feet and offered them obeisances and prayers, they did not embrace him, but simply stood up to hear the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although Krishna was born as their son, Vasudeva and Devaki were always conscious of his position. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 44th chapter of Krishna, the killing of Kamsa. This was in contrast to Nanda and Yashoda, who were generally not, they're absorbed in being Krishna's parents, generally not thinking of his greatness. Vasudeva and Devaki thought of it more. It was described earlier when they were watching them fight in the arena, they were worried because they didn't know the strength of their son. So at that point, they're in the Leela. And here now they're like conscious of his position. So when the boys are offering reverence to their parents, as is appropriate for a child to their superiors, they're like seeing them as God. Any reflections on that action movie? That was the 44th chapter. Yeah, let's look at these pictures. That's a good one because it is an action movie. And we did some sound effects, and now we're going to have some video highlights. So here's one sec. Here's Krishna and Balaram having entered Mathura, wearing clothes that they took from the washerman and the tailor had adjusted for them. Here's Krishna kind of like leaning jauntily on a cane. And behind him, there's a florist. No, that's not the florist, that's the tailor. And on the other side is the washerman with his head separated from his body, liberated. And the next picture is the death blow. This is what Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis and Tom Cruise and all the action figure people are trying to be, is this Krishna here giving the death blow to the impious King Kamsa. Yeah.
Can you repeat the difference between the two liberations? Because that was like going to be my question. How does someone who wanted to kill Krishna his entire life get this?
Yeah. Generally, the inimical, those who are not actually devotees to the Lord, when they die in Krishna's association or they're killed by him, they get sayujya, which just means they just merge.
Oh.
But when Krishna kills someone himself as Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not just as any of his incarnations, he often will just give personal liberation. Personal liberation includes can include a few different kinds of things that are described in the third canto. One is sarupya mukti, which means to have a spiritual form. One is sarshti, to have opulences like the Lord, spiritual opulences. One is salokya, to reside on the same planet as the Lord, and samipya, to have proximity, close association. Generally only ever given to devotees, but we see with we saw it as early as Putana, the baby killing she demon, which Krishna took her milk and took her life, and when he did, he made her like a mother or a nursemaid in the spiritual world, and it was shocking to the devotees. When Uddhava reflects on this, he's astonished, like, how could anyone be more merciful than Krishna? Because he gives personal association to an assassin of babies. Just because she came and she's like, I'll pretend to be his mother. And so Krishna's like, well, trying to feed me. Talk about finding the good and the bad. So that's Krishna. And those terms, sarupya, salokya, samipya, they're given in the third canto by Kapila Dev. There's a section there where he talks to his mother, Devahuti, and he's talking about spiritual opulences and liberation and so forth. And it's described there.
I thought it was really sweet, like, this is Christian's Leela, so like, he could like play with them and do whatever he wanted with them, but when he saw like the anxiety of the women and the anxiety of his parents, he's like, okay, like, I'm having enough fun here, like, this is fun and all, but I'm gonna end this so that they're not, they wanted their hearts to break a little bit, I think, because again, that creates that attraction and love for him, but also he's sweet and compassionate, so he's like, okay, I'm not gonna like drag this out just for my fun all around swamp. So I thought that was sweet.
Absolutely. And if you see like in action movies, there's always a moment of crisis where it looks like that the hero is going to lose, and then he turns it all around. And maybe there's a damsel in distress, or his friends get to cheer him on, or whatever, and he's like triumphant. So there's that dramatic arc. We can only imagine what it would be like to witness Krishna and Balaram taking on the elephant, taking on the wrestlers, and you're like, oh my God, they're gonna send those two wrestlers to kill our little Krishna and Balaram. The palpitations, the sweating, and it's not like he could do anything. Kamsa's there like, rubbing his hands in glee. He's got his armed soldiers surrounding the whole thing, so no one can interfere with what they all assume is a straightforward match, but is actually supposed to be a rigged match to kill Krishna and little Balaram. And wouldn't you know it, they pull it off. The plucky pair, they pull it off. Underdogs. We talked last time a bit about like how Bugs Bunny is an underdog, and the road runner, and Krishna's pulling a bit of that kind of energy out of his hat with this Leela. And here with Kamsa, it was more of like a action hero, and the wrestlers, where it's like a bit of more of an even match on paper. It's like human on human, and they're just beating up on the bad guys. So if you ever see that kind of thing, some movie or TV show, it's all just like a rip off of Krishna and Balaram. Any more reflections? Nancy.
Hopefully, there it is. I'm not echoing now. Thanks. I thought it was interesting, the change in cadence when the women started talking about how fortunate the gopis were in Vrindavan. As this is going on, all of a sudden that Leela came in and overlaid the scene. I thought that was pretty interesting, that came up. Any thoughts on that? Or
yeah, let me go back and look at that. So first is a description of Chandrana and Mushtika, the wrestlers, and Krishna and Balaram are like paired up with them, and now they are matched up. They're locking, they're grappling, they're doing all the things that they do. But then you can almost imagine like the camera panning to the audience, and they're like, some of them are not very happy. They're complaining that this is not a fair fight, and how is this happening? This is against the principles of justice. We can't just sit here and enjoy this. And then they're saying, but look, Krishna's so beautiful. There are drops of perspiration on his face from chasing his enemy, and his face appears like a lotus flower with drops of water. And Balaram has become reddish because he's fighting so hard. His white complexion is like becoming pink or red because he's really going for it. He's flushed. So even in the midst of their like objection to the, on one level, like injustice, they're like still, they don't just leave because they're like, but he's so beautiful. Look at him. And then they start just glorifying him. And then one of them says, they starts connecting it to like just think about how fortunate they must be in Vrindavan that they have this every day. Who even are these residents of Vrindavan that they have this every day? They have the two most beautiful persons. So one of the things to take away from this is that devotees are great appreciators. Even though nobody in Mathura wants to live in Vrindavan exactly, they're all perfectly situated where they are. We actually saw this in Vrindavan too. The gopis are thinking like, oh, when Krishna goes, he's going to be distracted by all those pretty city girls. And he's going to forget about us. Because it's the city, and like it's all sophisticated, and we're just simple farmers' daughters. And He's never going to think of us again. They just wish he would come back, right? And in Mathura, they're thinking like, I would give anything to have grown up in that town, to see these boys become the men they are now, like, and to see them every day. In the morning when they go out to the pasture, and in the evening when they come back, like, those must be the most advanced persons in the world to be able to live this. It can't be a coincidence that they have that fortune. So devotees are always appreciating. They're grateful for their service, and they, even if they don't have the same spiritual position as another person, they're like, wow, look at them. Look at their service. Isn't that amazing? They're inspired by that. They glorify it. It's a great quality. There's no enmity. There's no competition. Even though they're like, they'd rather Krishna stay with them, in Mathura, and in Vrindavan, they'd rather stay with them in Vrindavan, but they're always appreciating the fortune of someone else who's serving Krishna. Like, wow, they must really be serving Krishna nicely. Just like when the gopis were left by Krishna, they were lamenting. And then they saw the footprints, and they put on their detective hats, and they said, "Oh, Krishna's with one woman, and here he like raised on his toes to find a flower from the tree, and he must be carrying her. And now there's only one footstep, and here she is. She's been abandoned." And then they felt bad for her. They didn't feel jealous, even though she was the most fortunate. She's Radharani herself. They're like, "Oh, he even left her," and their hearts went out to her, and they all kind of like gave her some support and love. So that's an important takeaway. Devotees really look out for each other and are grateful for other devotees. And if you see a devotee doing something you can't do, like they're empowered in their service, you should just be like, wow, that's awesome. I wish I could serve Krishna as well as that. That's fantastic. I'm so glad Krishna is getting served like that. I'm so glad he gets to enjoy those wonderful results. That's how spiritual minded people think. Materially minded is like, God damn it, why can't I do that? I want to see them crush. I want what they have. So night and day. So that's a difference that often comes, a stark difference that is often illustrated in the pages of Bhagavatam. More reflections, comments? We're not going to get to the next chapter, unbelievably, because it's a long chapter. We did a chunky chapter 44.
I was also going to say, like, there's this theme, I'll just bring up women here, that we see women glorified so much through these leelas. Again, pointing out like the women weren't getting absorbed in the fight and like they were literally taken to another place and glorifying Krishna. And we see this with the gopis, we see this even with the women there. And so I just really feel like it's a very feminist text, and I don't know, it just makes me like feel really good about the position of how Krishna's like bringing women into this leelas. Like,
yeah, it is feminist in the pure sense of it, because it's not actually dualistic. It's not like pitting men against women or this group against that group. Krishna is responding to the bhakti of his devotees. He did with Sudama, he did with the tailor, he did with the washer, he did with Kubja, and he doesn't care about the externals. Some of them might, like the tailor, the washer was like very obsessed with right and wrong of the world, and like, no, you can't do this, and he didn't actually see Krishna as God worth serving, so he got a certain result. But some of them were just like Sudama, complete pure devotee. Krishna meets him on that level. Some are mixed, like Kubja. And so, in other words, it's not an advantage or a disadvantage to be in one material position or another. Whereas in material consciousness and in the material world, everything has a position. There is no tie. There is always an advantage and a disadvantage. If you want the peanut butter off the top shelf, you want the tall person to get it, not the short person. If you have like a small car, you want to be small, not big. There's just nobody's equal to anyone else. Everyone is different materially. And so that can, because of conditioning in that kind of world and that kind of living, one starts to think that one's value is also different. If I was in that position, I'd be better off. I'm more important. I'm more valuable. I have more value. It's a holdover from material consciousness. And in spiritual consciousness, it makes no difference at all. But it is a fact that there are very advanced women devotees who are glorified, especially in this 10th canto. What with the wives of the Brahmins, the queens of Dwarka, who we're going to get to, the woman of Mathura, and of course, above all, the gopis. And it's notable because they are in a very humble position materially, and it doesn't matter. But the gopis of Vrindavan are not particularly educated. They're not particularly, they're just little farmers' daughters. Even in the context of Vrindavan, they're just young girls. They don't have a whole lot of power over the village and the decision making. They just love Krishna. They're just completely in love with him. But their bhakti is so powerful, and Krishna responds with it so deeply because of how they feel for him and what they've given up just to be with him and just to love and serve him. The contrast is notable and deliberate. Because the Leela, the context of the culture gives an extra taste and flavor to the Leela. It's like, here they are. Some of them are married to other men, but their love for Krishna is so pure that when he plays the flute, they just come running. And in a society that's that ordered and that sattvic and that loyal and dutiful, for them to abandon their vows and their kids, some of them were feeding their kids when Krishna played the flute. They just ran to him because they are pure devotees. Actually, Krishna is the supreme husband of everybody. But that contrast between their humble position and the elevation of their bhakti, it gives it a certain, flavor. So it's not that it's like the same old women versus men, and yeah, the women win this time. Yeah, women rule. It's like not exactly that. That's still dualistic thinking. It's just like actual freedom. It doesn't matter what your position is. You have nothing to lose and nothing to gain by it, or by any other position. Therefore, a pure devotee has no particular attachment or aversion to even heaven or hell. That's a verse in the 6th canto affirms that. Narayana parasarve nakutasthana bibhiti svarga apavarga narakeshu apitulyartha darshanaha. Pure devotees, Lord Shiva says to his wife in that section, just look at the glories of these devotees, he says to Parvati. Look at them. They're amazing. They can take heaven, hell, liberation, or bondage in the material world is equal, because for them, in any situation, they can serve the Lord. Isn't that outstanding? So male or female is like, whatever. I can serve Krishna one way or another. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, I would rather come back as a dog in the house of the Vaishnava. They can give me their mercy. I'd rather come back as an ant that can remember you, Lord, rather than a demigod Brahma that forgets you. So it's very liberating, because if you play, not you, but if anyone plays the game of like, this ism or that ism or this group or that group, you're just setting yourself up for another birth. You have like country A goes to war with country B, and you spend your whole life in country A thinking of your enemies in country B. You take birth in country B among all your former enemies, and you kill your old family. It's like it's just a trip, just one trip after another. But if you're just Krishna conscious, then you're free. You're free from all that. No more games. No more running around trying to collect paraphernalia and see who wins. So yeah, the women here, which in the traditional culture, they were a very humble position, are very deliberately glorified because they happen to have the most advanced bhakti there.
So Kamsa knows his life is going to end because of Krishna.
Yeah.
But yet he's inviting him also to set him up. And what does he think is going to happen? He knows what's going to happen. So
he's hoping against hope. He's trusting in his own strength. He's the same psychology that gives rise to a fear of dying is the same psychology that thinks that I can actually prevent death. My own power. I can actually make it happen. Never happened before. There's no precedent for it. We've got 100% success rate for death in the world. But I got this. I got this really good idea, actually. It involves 2 wrestlers and an elephant. That blind optimism for your own personal God project to make yourself the center of the universe. It is crazy. If you look at it, it's actually completely bonkers. It's insane. But that's the nature of the false ego. That same false ego that is like, I am this body. I must not die. That same false ego is what gives rise to these insane ideas of conquering death. So there is a certain lunacy in it. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And it's a very painful situation for Kamsa to be in. He actually suffers more than anybody. He suffered Krishna's entire life, day in and day out, sweating, thinking, planning, plotting, sending goon after Krishna and failing. And then, trapped by his own fear. So we're meant to feel bad for him. Don't be like that guy. Any more reflections? Anything that stood out? Action movie Krishna.
Thank you for making.
Yeah, I mean, it's Prabhupada's mercy. Give us the Krishna book. It really is a spiritual comic book with these pictures and these short chapters and punchy, amazing, pun intended, punchy action sequences and dialogue. Krishna's Leela is like irreplaceable. What we do without it? So, you're welcome.
I love the reality and the reminder of the reality, the truth that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the shelter for all, because it's really easy and like it's easy to get caught up. Wow, this is violent. We spoke about.
Wow, we killed an elephant. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, killed another living entity. Oh, and now he's punching him thrice, and the life got and it isn't in the material context and perspective that we understand the world. We're understanding a new perspective, right? And that this is not just a 14-year-old boy who looks like he's 18, who's strong, fighting in the gladiator, Kamsa trials. It's like, no, he's giving his shelter to every single person in that arena. Whether he's killing them or getting his darshan or touching their lotus feet or sweating and making them flustered, whatever it may be, he's like giving his shelter, and he's giving his shelter to us right now in hearing it.
Yeah. He's all good. Everything about him is all good. Even talking about these pastimes invokes him, and that's all good. Shukadev got benefit by talking about him. Parikshit got benefit by hearing about him. Prabhupada got benefit by translating and commenting. We're all getting benefit. It doesn't end. Yeah. Yeah, the supreme shelter. Supreme shelter. He's just taking one of his part and parcels back home. So for this week, because somehow it's 8 o'clock. Don't ask me how that happened. Yeah. So for this week, write your reflections on chapter 44. And if you read it or heard it, anything that stood out for you. And we talked about some themes you could touch on, if you like. Talked about like Krishna as the supreme action hero. There's that. There's the principle of like not tolerating injustice when you see it. There's Krishna again reciprocating with everybody according to their position and their service to him. There's Krishna's comical interlude where he wrestles his friends and loses to them to taunt Kamsa. And there's this beautiful triumphant scene of Krishna and then his parents being relieved beyond relief that he's alive. Yeah, and the glorification the devotees had for each other. The Mathura ladies are glorifying Vrindavan. Yeah. Flexing their appreciating capacity. Devotees are always appreciating. Yeah, and then next week we'll pick up at chapter 45. Shri Krishna Book Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Shri Krishna Balaram Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai, all glories to Krishna's devotees everywhere. Hare all. Thanks everyone. Thanks for the YouTube crew. See you on WhatsApp, see you online, see you in the comment section. How do you poll?